My folks insisted I extend an invitation to my sibling, who'd been intimate with my former partner, for my nuptials. So, I reached out to the individual they'd most wronged, and utter bedlam ensued. I'm Katie, 27 years of age, and I recently got hitched. One would presume this was meant to be among the pinnacle moments of my existence, correct? Alas, not quite. What should have been a splendid festivity devolved into a tumultuous spectacle, all thanks to my dear kin. Instead of relishing the occasion, I found myself evading conflict at every turn. They seemed intent on sabotaging my special day, and truthfully, they nearly prevailed. Yet, I'm not one to passively accept such machinations. Consequently, I resolved to afford them a taste of their own medicine, and now they portray me as the antagonist in this entire saga. I require an impartial viewpoint here, so permit me to detail precisely what transpired. Allow me to furnish a bit of background. I am the youngest of 5 within my household. First, there's my mother. She epitomizes the almond mum, archetype constantly adhering to some novel dietary regimen and subtly, or not so subtly, scrutinizing every morsel you consume. Then there's my father, whose primary preoccupation is capital. If it doesn't pertain to equities, ventures, or the term gain, he appears utterly disengaged. Now let's discuss my eldest sister. To put it mildly, she's somewhat of a terror. Our rapport has always been strained. She consistently held the status of the favored offspring, while I was, well, merely present. Throughout our upbringing, she possessed an uncanny knack for making my life a misery. For instance, she'd perpetually devise schemes to mortify me in public, and somehow, she invariably managed to manipulate situations to cast me as the wrongdoer. It's safe to assert our connection is far from robust. The sole family member with whom I genuinely connect is my grandmother. She is the epitome of sweetness, a genuinely grounded individual, and candidly, the only one who ever made me feel consequential. As for myself, I was dispatched to boarding school for the majority of my formative years, thus I never truly cultivated a deep bond with any family member. While my sister monopolized attention, I was largely out of sight, out of mind. During my youth, I was quite close to my aunt as well. She was like the spirited, enjoyable adult in my existence, and we spent a considerable amount of time together. However, when I was approximately 13, she abruptly relocated. I never truly comprehended why, and it transpired just before my consignment to boarding school, so whatever affiliation I held with her, and frankly, with the rest of my relatives, simply withered. Now, let me recount how I ended up at boarding school. The abridged version, it's all attributable to my sister. She utterly detested that mother and father opted for a second child. She craved all the limelight for herself. Thus, she made it her life's ambition to transform my existence into a living hell. I became her preferred scapegoat for every transgression. My sister possessed a habit of damaging household items, such as mother's cherished vase or father's golf trophies, and then, inexplicably, I'd always bear the culpability. She'd adopt her most innocent demeanor, replete with feigned tears, and regale them with some absurd tale blaming me. On one occasion, she even persuaded them that I had pilfered funds from Dad's wallet, which was preposterous, as I didn't even know where he kept it, but naturally, they believed her. When I was 12, matters truly escalated. She inadvertently spilled crimson liquid across my mother's beloved pristine sofa and asserted to Mom that I was the culprit due to my carelessness. Another time, she mutilated Dad's crucial work documents and declared she witnessed me doing it out of ennui. Unsurprisingly, they believed her every time. The days would conclude, but my narratives concerning my sister would never cease. Returning to the crux of the matter, the ultimate provocation occurred when she shattered a precious family heirloom crystal receptacle that had been in our lineage for generations. She vehemently swore I was frolicking and caused it to topple. Mother and father were enraged, and rather than heeding my defense, they concluded I was too problematic and dispatched me to boarding school. My parents were largely absent for the majority of my life. They never truly appeared for any of my scholastic events. I recall once having a significant recital where I performed the piano, and it was a momentous occasion for me. I scanned the audience, hoping to discern them there, but no, just a sea of unfamiliar faces. On another occasion, I had a science fair exhibit I dedicated weeks to, and when I secured first place, they weren't present to celebrate. They didn't frequently call either. I was mostly self-sufficient, and after a period, it simply ceased to bother me. Their absence became the norm. Upon completing my schooling and returning to my native city for university, I harbored hopes that circumstances might be different. I was once again residing with my sister, and the turmoil recommenced. Cohabitation with her was akin to re-entering a war zone. She still managed to centralize everything around herself and transform every minor detail into a confrontation. My sister was the favored individual in college. Everyone was acquainted with her. She had resided in the vicinity her entire life, so she was somewhat of a notable figure. I, conversely, was the newcomer endeavoring to maintain a low profile. Yet, she could not tolerate the notion of people drawing comparisons between us, so she made it her objective to render my life a nightmare. She commenced by uttering disparaging remarks whenever we were in the presence of her companions. On one occasion, she casually mentioned before everyone that I was a late bloomer academically, which wasn't even accurate. Another time, she hosted a substantial gathering and ensured I was not invited, solely to make me feel ostracized. The final outrage was on prom night. I discovered her with my paramour, and she didn't even bother to conceal it. It was as if she desired me to witness her parading him before me. It was so brazen, she was practically exulting in her ability to seize whatever she desired, including my significant other. I had endured enough. I informed Mother about it, anticipating some succor or at least a modicum of empathy, but she merely dismissed it as trivial. Consequently, I made the resolve to depart. I relocated to a distinct metropolis for my collegiate and university studies, severing ties with my family and commencing anew. So, after relocating, I completed my tertiary education in my new city. I was compelled to request financial assistance from my family to cover my tuition, and thankfully, they assented. It wasn't until later that I ascertained it was actually grandmother who was subsidizing the expenses, not mother and father. But at least someone cared enough to assist. While I was constructing my new existence, I encountered an extraordinary individual. I fell in love, and we became betrothed. It was a sublime experience. He treated me with such consideration, and for once, I felt genuinely cherished. We resolved to marry, and it was everything I had envisioned and more. Thus, it was time to apprise my family. I was simultaneously elated and apprehensive about divulging the news. After all I had endured, I desired them to know I was thriving and content. When I informed my family of the engagement, their reaction was rather underwhelming. It was as if they were barely interested, just a nonchalant, "Oh, all right then." They didn't appear to harbor any significant objections, but they weren't precisely ecstatic either. I was content with that. I didn't anticipate them to suddenly become overwhelmingly enthusiastic. So, the wedding preparations commenced. My mother proposed I return home and host the ceremony there. Frankly, I was rather ambivalent about that notion. I had established a life for myself in my current locality, and I wished to celebrate the occasion here. Thus, I opted to remain put and orchestrate the wedding locally. When it came to the actual planning, my parents were virtually absent. They offered little assistance or input. Conversely, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were incredibly supportive. They truly stepped up and aided with every detail, from locating the ideal venue to coordinating specifics. I felt genuinely included and bolstered by them, which rendered the entire procedure far more pleasurable. Now, it was time to dispatch the invitations. After they were sent, I had a discussion with Mother, and she remarked that I had made an oversight on the invites. I had neglected to include my sister's name. Before I could even elucidate, she dismissed it as inconsequential, stating that she had already apprised my sister of the wedding, and that they would all be in attendance. I was aghast. Hold on a moment. I thought, that wasn't an error. I deliberately excluded her. I do not desire her presence at my wedding. But Mother merely brushed me off, behaving as though I were throwing a tantrum. She admonished me not to be absurd, and that it was a minor mistake. When I indicated that my sister had been intimate with my former partner and that was why I did not wish her there, Mother became incensed. She contended that I was being irrational and nursing resentments. She insisted that I should not permit old grievances to impede familial relations and that I should seize this opportunity to mend our bond. I was utterly dumbfounded. I mean, truly? Rebuilding connections with someone who had betrayed me so profoundly. It felt as though Mother was completely disregarding my sentiments and prioritizing family cohesion over my own welfare. I was not having any of it. I informed Mother that there had never been any genuine family unity and I had always been marginalized. I made it unequivocally clear that I did not desire my sister at my wedding, period. Mother retorted by asserting that if I did not permit my sister to come, no one from the family would appear. That was the absolute limit. I was furious, and I could not fathom her utilizing that as leverage. I didn't even bother to dispute further. I simply terminated the call and resolved to adhere to my stance regarding her non-attendance. I spent some time seething over everything, and then it dawned on me, my family had never truly cared about my feelings. If they were threatening to boycott my wedding simply because I didn't desire my sister's presence, why should I concern myself with their opinions? Thus, I determined to take a stand. I planned to invite someone my family had considerable animosity towards my aunt. It was somewhat of a defiant act, but it felt justifiable. If my family wished to play games, I would simply invite someone who would disrupt the status quo and demonstrate to them that I would not permit them to dictate my day. So, allow me to provide a bit of background concerning my aunt. She was perpetually Father's least favored, and there was this persistent friction between them. Despite that, she was always exceedingly kind and affectionate towards my sister and me. But then, something transpired, I'm not entirely certain what, but there was a colossal rupture, and she ended up moving away. Over the years, I pieced together that Dad had somehow implicated her and instigated difficulties between her and grandmother. There were also complications with her marriage, which, as far as I could discern, were largely Mother's doing. I never received the complete account, but it was evident that Dad had done a real disservice to her. With all this in mind, I resolved to contact my aunt. Perhaps it was time to reconnect and invite someone into my life who genuinely cared and had also been wronged by my family. It felt like a means of leveling the playing field. Reaching out to my aunt was somewhat challenging initially. She did not respond to my attempts at communication. So, I resolved to take matters into my own hands and visit her in person. Fortunately, she didn't reside too far from me, though I was astonished to discover she had been in the vicinity all along. And when I appeared at her dwelling, she was somewhat reserved initially, but after I elucidated everything, how my mother, father, and sister had treated me and how I had consistently felt overlooked, she invited me inside. We settled down for tea, and she began to reveal what had transpired between her and the family. Here's the revelation. Aunt had a beau whom grandmother did not countenance. Mother and father took it upon themselves to fill grandmother's mind with falsehoods, making her believe that aunt was contemplating elopement and disregarded grandmother's sentiments. They informed aunt that grandmother had issued an ultimatum, either sever ties with the boyfriend or be disowned. Aunt was devastated and attempted to reason with grandmother, but grandmother had already been led to believe that aunt had chosen the boyfriend over her. The situation rapidly escalated. Grandmother suffered a minor shock and required hospitalization. Father informed aunt that grandmother did not wish to see her and would disown her, which was entirely untrue. Father's manipulation persisted when he asserted aunt had abandoned grandmother in her hour of need, causing aunt to feel utterly betrayed and rejected. Mother and father did not desist there. They continued to disseminate rumors, claiming aunt was self-centered and callous, and accused her of not caring about the family's reputation. They even went so far as to state aunt had embezzled funds from grandmother's account to cover her boyfriend's expenditures, which was a complete fabrication. Aunt later realized that my parents had likely orchestrated much of the drama to create a rift between her and grandmother. However, by then, she lacked the courage to confront grandmother again after all that had transpired. She never sought to mend the relationship, which only compounded the confusion and hurt. Mother and father possessed a talent for engendering misunderstandings and sowing discord. They would distort narratives and manipulate circumstances to cast others in a negative light. They even once informed relatives that aunt had been the catalyst for grandmother's health issues, portraying her as a villain in a familial drama she never intended to be a part of. I managed to persuade my aunt to attend my wedding and subsequently endeavored to clarify matters with grandmother. It required some coaxing, but she consented to be present. I also informed her about how my sister had treated me and how my family was insisting that I invite her as well. Aunt agreed to come, even though she wasn't thrilled about it. On the day of the wedding, things began turbulently. My sister arrived with my mother, and they immediately commenced making derisive remarks. My mother was lavishing all her attention on my sister until she spotted aunt. The expression of shock and indignation on her countenance was priceless. Mother approached me, fuming, demanding to know why I had invited aunt. I informed her that we needed to mend our familial bonds and that it was an opportunity to be a harmonious family once more. Mother was enraged. She wished to create a scene, but I had already apprised my sister-in-law of the situation. She intervened and assisted in managing matters, ensuring we could proceed with the ceremony smoothly despite the tension. We managed to have a delightful ceremony. I could feel my family's accusatory gazes directed at me as I proceeded down the aisle. The ceremony was exquisite, and for once I felt as though I was making my own choices and asserting myself. After the wedding ceremony, it was time for the reception, but that's when matters spiraled out of control. My aunt had led grandmother to a separate room to converse, and my parents were frantically attempting to gain entry to ascertain what was transpiring. They were practically pounding on the door, desperate to intercede. Meanwhile, my sister was uttering disdainful comments about the wedding's inferiority and the cheapness of the decorations. My sister-in-law offered swift and refined rejoinders, such as emphasizing how everyone was enjoying themselves and how the focus should be on the newlyweds rather than making petty observations. I was drained and disinclined to contend with any of this drama, especially my sister's incessant negativity. I instructed my parents to grant aunt and grandmother some privacy and allow them to converse confidentially. But instead of complying, they began yelling at me, accusing me of attempting to ruin their supposedly blissful family. They declared I was being self-centered and striving to foment more discord. My husband and mother-in-law had reached their limit. They intervened and threatened to eject my parents if they did not cease creating a spectacle. At this juncture, Dad lost his composure. He insulted me before everyone, uttering remarks such as he had never favored me and that I had consistently been the problematic offspring. He branded me a disappointment and asserted I had always been challenging to manage. I felt on the verge of collapse. So, my husband stepped forward and summoned security. They arrived and escorted my parents from the venue. It was a difficult moment, but I was thankful for my husband's succor. The reception continued, and despite the tumult, we managed to salvage what remained of the evening and enjoy ourselves. After the ceremony concluded, I finally had a moment to inspect my phone, only to discover it inundated with messages from my family, and that's when it struck me. I had utterly forgotten about my sister. I presumed she had departed after my parents were expelled, but no, she was still at the wedding. Not only that, but she had gone live on social media, in floods of tears, railing about my ingratitude for expelling our parents from my own wedding. Apparently, she was fabricating this entire narrative for her followers, asserting how I had been a nightmare my entire life. She claimed that I had always harbored envy towards her, that I never appreciated the affection and backing the family afforded me. She made it sound as though I was some self-centered brat who mistreated her, perpetually seeking to outdo her or sideline her. She declared I had tarnished the family's standing by inviting aunt, and then possessed the audacity to disrespect my parents on the most significant day of my life. Her live stream was replete with exaggerated histrionics, like claiming I had consistently been a source of trouble and that I was difficult to love, and how she had exerted such effort to be a commendable sister, but I had alienated her. According to her, she was the flawless daughter who bore the family's burdens, while I was some rebellious, ungrateful catastrophe who comprehended not the meaning of kinship. The comments were voraciously consuming it too, with people extending sympathy and uttering phrases like, "How could your own sister do that?" and You merit better, you're too good for her. I could not believe it. She was hijacking my wedding to portray herself as the favored child. Instead of enjoying my wedding, I was completely ensnared by my sister's theatrics. It was as if I could not elude my family's pandemonium, even on my momentous day. I needed to escape, so I telephoned Grandma, hoping for some sanity. As it transpired, Grandma and Aunt had been together the entire time after their private conversation during the wedding. When Grandma answered, she actually sounded rather serene. I inquired how it had gone, and she stated that she and Aunt had finally truly conversed for the first time in years. Apparently, Aunt disclosed everything that had occurred all those years ago. She informed Grandma about how Mom and Dad had distorted the entire situation concerning her boyfriend. Aunt explained how she attempted to convey the truth to Grandma, but by then, Mom and Dad had already filled Grandma's mind with fabrications, such as how Aunt was going to abscond and abandon the family. They even informed Grandma that Aunt disregarded what she thought and would elope regardless. Aunt was heartbroken when Grandma issued that ultimatum: sever ties with her boyfriend or be disowned. Grandma was astonished hearing all of this because she believed Aunt had simply decided to depart. But Aunt explained that after Grandma experienced that minor shock and ended up in the hospital, Dad would not permit her to visit. He told her that Grandma did not wish to see her and had resolved to disown her. Aunt believed him, of course, and did not wish to create more problems, so she simply left in exasperation. Dad ensured Grandma believed Aunt was indifferent, while Aunt believed that Grandma had disowned her a complete shambles. They commenced piecing things together right there at my wedding. Grandma even remarked that over the years she had been wounded and perplexed by Aunt's abrupt disappearance. She always wondered why Aunt never reached out, especially after Grandma's health crises. Aunt stated she had attempted, but every time Dad or Mom obstructed her. On one occasion, Aunt had dispatched flowers to Grandma after a surgical procedure, but Mom informed Grandma they were from a family friend. There were calls Aunt made that never got through because Mom would intercept them. There was even a birthday when Aunt sent a card, and Mom conveniently neglected to pass it on. Grandma apologized, stating she regretted not questioning matters sooner, and Aunt admitted she had been too incensed and fearful to reach out after everything. They wept, embraced, and just like that, years of tension dissipated. So, while I was contending with my sister's emotional outburst and my parents' paroxysms, at least Grandma and Aunt managed to achieve reconciliation. If anything beneficial emerged from this wedding, it was that. I resolved to pursue legal action against my sister for defamation because I am utterly finished with this family. My aunt and grandma are supporting me and stated that she also intends to sue my parents for manipulation and psychological torment. Now, my parents are blaming me and asserting that I instigated all these problems. Seriously, am I the jerk for not capitulating to my parents' demands and inviting my aunt? Or am I the jerk for asserting myself? I require opinions. Update 1. Well, it's been a week since the nuptials, and developments have been rather intriguing, to say the least. I've been perusing your comments, and I appreciate the encouragement. Now, to those labeling me foolish and claiming I deserve this for enduring my family for so long and inviting them. Folks, be pragmatic. This is my family we're discussing. I love them, naturally. Now, I hold differing viewpoints, but back then, I never imagined they would stoop to such depths. Anyway, here's the latest. My mother-in-law is somewhat peeved by all the hullabaloo, which I entirely comprehend. I mean, who desires to contend with this nonsense immediately following a wedding, right? But, honestly, she's been commendable overall, just a trifle exasperated by how everything transpired. On the brighter side, my husband and sister-in-law are fully supporting me. They've been exceptional throughout all of this, which renders dealing with my family a bit more tolerable. Oh, and I've actually initiated legal proceedings against my sister for that video she disseminated. Yes, I'm taking her to court on grounds of defamation. According to my legal counsel, I possess a robust case. He asserts that by broadcasting those fabrications about me, she has tarnished my reputation, and that could entail severe legal repercussions for her. We're discussing potential restitution for emotional distress and even reputational damage. Apparently, she could end up disbursing a substantial penalty or even being compelled to publicly recant her assertions. It serves her right, frankly. But that's not all. My aunt decided she would not permit my parents to evade accountability either. She's suing them for manipulation and psychological harassment. The lawyer believes she also possesses a strong case, particularly with all the evidence of how they interfered with her, life-obstructing her from seeing Grandma, spreading falsehoods, and essentially gaslighting her for years. If matters proceed favorably for us, my parents might be facing serious legal ramifications, such as compensatory damages for the emotional toll they've inflicted upon her. Since the lawsuits were filed, my parents have been in a state of utter panic. Initially, they attempted to rectify matters by telephoning and sending messages, expressing remorse, and advocating for us to withdraw the lawsuits for the sake of familial harmony. When that proved ineffectual, they lashed out, attributing all fault to me. They declared I was fracturing the family, and that I was merely being vindictive, and that all they desired was to preserve family cohesion. My father even accused me of being ungrateful and spiteful, asserting I was penalizing them for endeavoring to act appropriately. But honestly, I am weary of their guilt trips. Update 2. So, Reddit, we finally had our day in court, and honestly, I couldn't have requested a more favorable outcome. First up, my sister. She arrived with this entire poor me demeanor, as if she were the casualty in all of this. It was almost risible. In court, my legal representative presented all the evidence, including the social media posts where she went live, weeping and spreading falsehoods about me expelling my parents, mistreating her, and being this dreadful, self-centered individual. The judge did not appear particularly impressed by her performance. My sister attempted to portray it as a misunderstanding, but the video spoke for itself. She was unequivocally clear about her intentions to publicly humiliate me. In the end, the court ruled in my favor. The judge stated her actions were deliberate and malicious, and I was awarded compensation for emotional distress. It wasn't a colossal sum, but it sufficed to make a statement. She's also been mandated to publicly recant her assertions and publish an apology on all her social media platforms, which is probably the most gratifying aspect, because we all comprehend the immense importance she places on her online persona, witnessing her compelled to acknowledge her wrongdoing chef's kiss. Now, concerning my parents, Aunt's case was considerably more intricate, but she excelled in court. She possessed text messages, old emails, and even some correspondence demonstrating the extent to which mother and father had manipulated her over the years. It was astonishing. There were messages where Dad was informing Grandma that Aunt was indifferent towards her, and another where Mom had actually impersonated Grandma, instructing Aunt to maintain distance. The lawyer meticulously examined everything, and it was unequivocally clear that my parents had spent years engaging in psychological warfare with her. The court also ruled in favor of Aunt. My parents were found culpable of emotional and psychological harassment. They are obliged to remit a substantial sum in compensatory damages to her, which, let's be candid, is more money than they ever expended on me. Aunt also obtained a restraining order against them, so they are prohibited from contacting her or approaching her anymore. Honestly, I believe she's more relieved than anything else. She is finally liberated from their dominion, and it's as if an immense burden has been lifted from her shoulders. My parents attempted to portray themselves as the victims throughout, claiming they merely desired to safeguard the family, but the court was not convinced. At one juncture, Dad even bellowed in the courtroom about how Aunt and I were ungrateful, how he had made sacrifices for the family, and how I had been a troublesome child my entire life. The judge swiftly silenced him. It was rather gratifying to observe, honestly. So, that's our current standing. My sister is officially disgraced on social media, my aunt has found her tranquility, and my parents have finally been held accountable for their absurdity. Update 3. Well, the rollercoaster continues its trajectory, but this time, it's actually ascending. So, here's the latest news. Grandma has officially resolved to divest Mom and Dad from her property and inheritance. Yes, you read that correctly. She has had her fill of their manipulations, and she's bequeathing everything to Aunt and me. Honestly, I was stunned when she informed me, but she asserted it was the sole means by which she could genuinely progress and achieve inner calm. I suppose after witnessing the extent to which Mom and Dad interfered with Aunt, she realized they merited nothing. Aunt attempted to dissuade her, stating it wasn't essential, but Grandma was resolute. "You both deserve this after everything," she declared. Naturally, my parents are not accepting it well. They've been endeavoring to instigate discord, but this time, they're targeting my mother-in-law. Yes, they've been telephoning and messaging her, attempting to paint me as the antagonist and enlist her allegiance. But allow me to tell you, my mother-in-law is no fool. She promptly rebuffed them. She even forwarded me their pathetic messages. It's honestly somewhat mortifying how desperate they've become. After witnessing how Aunt managed everything, I resolved to emulate her example and obtain a restraining order against my family.